Okay, it's Red versus Blue, episode number 76. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we are back. Lots going on. We're going to start with what you dub as a good week for the Republicans, and I will only add, not necessarily a good week for America.
I may not disagree with you on that, Mike, but for all of the times we've spoken about the bad things happening to the Republicans and how it's looking bad for them in the election, they did get a bunch of good news this week. The Virginia State Supreme Court, on state grounds, threw out the redistricting plan, which was approved by the voters, but which was apparently put on the ballot with some impropriety. That's going to save 4 Republican seats that were likely sure to be lost. The court also made some very significant gutting of the Voting Rights Act, and that has set off several of the southern states to eliminate the districts that were created to promote minority representation. In Louisiana, the governor actually suspended the upcoming congressional primary so they can redo the map that will essentially eliminate 1 black seat in Louisiana of the 2 that they are. And keep in mind that 1 in 3 voters in Louisiana is black. They have 2 congressmen. They're going to eliminate 1 of those seats. In Tennessee, they have eliminated a seat in Memphis. Memphis is a 60% black district, although the representative there for 20 years has been Steve Cohen, a white guy, white liberal Democrat. That seat has been split into 3 different districts that now spread as far as the southern Nashville suburbs. Not a lot to do with in common with Memphis. It's thought that both South Carolina and Alabama will make changes that could eliminate an additional minority district, maybe even James Clyburn's seat in South Carolina. Republicans could be a beneficiary of the reapportionment wars by as many as 10 seats. Although, to put that in perspective, even Karl Rove says, don't count on that when you dilute some of these Republican seats to make them more vulnerable to the incumbents losing. So it may be maybe closer to 6 seats. And even that is probably not going to be enough to maintain control of the House in the election. There was other good news for the Republicans. The jobs report was better than expected. The stock market has recovered from the post-war losses. Homeland Security Department finally reopened, so we can not have to worry about the TSA people being short-staffed any longer. So all in all, Republicans, for the first time really this year, have had a very good week politically. Now, we should note that with these reapportionment decisions, the Democrats still have more potential, and not this year, but going forward in the future, in California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey, to eliminate Republican seats. Inflation remains high. The war is still in a quagmire, right, and Trump's approval is at an all-time low. So while the Republicans will probably not get the blowout that was anticipated, it's still likely that they are going to lose control of the House.
And if we look at this civil rights, overturning the Civil Rights Act, or basically gutting it, everybody seems to be looking towards the midterms as it having an effect on that one way or the other. But I was looking long term, and I know the Republicans will say that, well, that doesn't mean that there won't still be black representation in those southern areas, because black people have the right to run for office in those areas as well, and they could likely win those. However, if we're going to be real about this, I think that after a few years, if this holds, we will not see any black representation in those southern states. How do you feel about that?
Well, you certainly see less. You'll see concentrated districts in Atlanta and New Orleans and a couple of the major cities, maybe in Miami, but you are definitely going to see fewer black representatives across the South. Now, you may see more Democrats, because when you distribute those black votes among white districts in an election that doesn't go the Republicans' way, and November is looking like one of those elections, you could see incumbents who thought they were safe lose. Karl Rove has been very upfront about warning people about this. This is the case in Texas. Florida has reapportioned. It's going to be the case in Florida as well, because the Hispanic vote that went for Republicans 2 years ago is, by all of the special elections held since then, not going for them this time.
I took the Democrats completely out of the equation, and I shouldn't have, because that is still a factor. As inefficient as they seem to be lately, they would still play a factor in the South, I guess.
It will be helpful in the short term to the Republicans. It may not be helpful in the long term. We'll see what happens. And again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The Democrats can eliminate more Republican seats in California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey. So it's a wide open field now for political mischief.
Gotcha. All right. Trump goes to China. This ought to be interesting, right?
Well, they canceled this trip or postponed this trip once because of the war. That's now back on. He's going to leave this week. It's a risky trip because the leverage now is with China. They actually hold the cards in all of this because Trump is preoccupied with the war. He needs things from China. China wants more access to American AI. Trump needs China to stop giving military intelligence and weapons to Iran. There are trade and tariff issues where now China really holds the upper hand. We need them to buy our soybeans. And it's widely expected that China will make a power move on Taiwan and that Trump will sort of in an offhand way retreat from America's historical position here. That makes this a very fraught trip for America, for all of our allies in Asia, and really for the world.
Based on how Trump operates, you just never know with this loose cannon attitude he has. If he gets over there and starts with that, who knows what he could do to not only our relationship with China, but our relationship with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. And if you're in South Korea or you're in Japan, or particularly if you're in Taiwan, you've got to be very, very concerned this week about what could come out of this. It was just announced today that apparently Tim Cook from Apple and Elon Musk are going to accompany him, so maybe they will help keep the focus on trade. But anything can happen when you get the two of them together and somebody strokes his ego enough and gets him to where he thinks he's going to make a deal that he thinks is in his interest.
Okay, and the final discussion we'll have comes under the banner of political updates. So give me the latest on these.
Well, we have a primary coming up in Texas. Actually, it's a runoff. Ken Paxton, the attorney general, is up by 3 points ahead of Senator John Cronin, which would be a major upset and a major disappointment for the Republicans. But what is true is that Tallarico, the Democrat, who has already cinched his nomination, is running ahead of both of them. So Texas right now would appear to be in play for the Democrats. Tallarico, because he doesn't have a runoff, has been able to accumulate a significant cash advantage over the two Republicans. It was expected that Trump would have endorsed Cronin back during the first round. He did not. He announced over the weekend he's going to announce somebody on the eve of the election. It's not clear who. And if it's Paxton, Paxton carries a tremendous amount of baggage into the general election because of his divorce, his impeachment, and his trials. So that's going to be a tough election for the Republicans, made more tough because of the president's involvement and because of the failure for the party to unify behind an incumbent senator. Now, there's other elections going on as well. Trump has been going after Senator Cassidy from Louisiana. He's now running third. He may not make it to a runoff in that state. Cassidy was one of the few Republicans to vote for impeachment. He also voted against his own better judgment for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Cassidy is a liver doctor and knows full well some of the quack medicine that's been coming out of Washington. That would be a huge loss for, I think, the good of the Republican Party. They'll probably still keep the seat. He's also going after Thomas Massie in Kentucky. We'll see if he's able to knock him off because of his vehement advocacy for the Epstein file victims. He beat 5 out of the 7 Indiana state Senate candidates, and one race is about 6 votes different, so he could beat 6 of the 7. Republicans spent $16 million going after incumbent Republicans in campaigns that normally cost $100,000 each. So a tremendous amount of campaign money was wasted there. Here in California, the Democrats are still sort of all bogged up together. There was a lot of talk that the Republicans could shut the Democrats out of the primary. Kudos to my friend John Fleischman on his podcast, who's pointed out it could also happen that the Democrats might shut out the Republicans. If two of them sort of consolidate all of the rest of the Democratic vote, and Bianco doesn't really fall away and he and his opponent continue to split the vote, you could see two Democrats make the runoff. Now, that's less likely than two Republicans, and two Republicans is less likely than a Republican or Democrat. But fun and games in California, there is no clear leader there between the two.
Yeah, and I don't see those lower-end Democrats dropping out anytime soon, and that's not good for the Democrats, right?
No, it's not. It's preventing the consolidation of votes for a leader, and it does create the opportunity for two Republicans to make it to the runoff. And then finally, we should mention that the Trump ballroom was going to be completely privately funded with $400 million raised by corporate interests privately by President Trump. The Republicans in the Senate have now asked for $1 billion in taxpayer money to complete the project.
How in the hell did that happen? And how in the hell aren't people outraged at this?
It's pretty amazing. The other thing today is that apparently he's trying to paint the bottom of the reflecting pool a different shade of blue to make it reflect a different color. And that's $16 million over budget as well, given the fact he awarded a no-bid contract. He's got his plan for the arch. He just dedicated his golden statue in Miami at Doral. It's an amazing situation. That's all you can say about it, Mike.
Well, I'd like to continue this podcast, but I got to go fill up my tank with some $6 gasoline at this point.
I'll see your mortgage broker first.
Yeah. Yeah, take out a second, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else we need to cover before you consolidated it all very well today. I really appreciate that, and I know our listeners do too.
Well, Mike, and everybody out there, stay tuned because so much happens so fast and it changes so frequently. We were, between the last podcast and today, we have been on the verge of peace, the verge of war. We're back on the verge of war again in the Middle East. The Strait has been opened. The Strait has been closed. We've had Project Freedom to bring the ships through, but it was suspended. By the way, California gets a lot of its oil from the Middle East, apparently. And the last ship has docked in the port of Los Angeles that's been able to get through the Strait.
Wow.
So we could expect some significant issues here in California before too much longer.
Stay tuned. Subscribe. Tell your friends about our show. We're growing at a massive, well, not so massive, but we're growing at a steady rate because we get emails, we get comments, we get all sorts of positive feedback about what we're doing here. So tell your friends about Red versus Blue. It's available on Spotify and all the places you get your podcast. And like us on Facebook, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Keep the faith.